I never thought I would catch my stepmother Diane with her hands literally in my mother's jewelry box. There she was, fingering the diamond pendant my dad had given Mom on their 20th anniversary, whispering to her daughter Jessica on the phone. "Trust me, sweetie. The entire collection will be yours for the wedding. Every last piece." My blood ran cold. Those precious gems were the last physical connection I had to my mother, who made me promise on her deathbed that they would stay in our family for generations. Dad had remarried barely 10 months after Mom lost her battle with cancer, and now this woman was giving away her legacy without even asking me. My name is Harry, and I am a 35-year-old custom jeweler. I learned the craft from my grandfather, who taught me to see beyond the sparkle of gems to the stories they held. When he placed his loupe in my 8-year-old hand and showed me how to examine a diamond's clarity, I knew this would be my life's work. There was something magical about taking raw materials and transforming them into pieces that would mark the milestones in someone's life. 3 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. The disease moved quickly, leaving us all reeling as she declined. During her final days, she called me to her bedside while Dad was getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "Harry," she whispered, her voice thin but determined. "My jewelry collection. I want you to keep it in the family. Promise me that these pieces will stay with our bloodline. Each one tells a story of our family, of love that endures." I held her frail hand, noting how her wedding ring now hung loose on her finger. "I promise, Mom. They'll never leave the family." She died 2 days later, and a piece of my father seemed to die with her. Thomas Mitchell, once vibrant and full of laughter at 62, became a shadow of himself. I worried about him constantly, checking in daily, bringing meals, trying to help him adjust to life without his partner of 38 years. Then, just 10 months after we buried my mother, Dad called with news that knocked the wind out of me. "Son, I've met someone. Her name is Diane Harlow. We're getting married next month." The wedding was a small affair at the courthouse. Diane, 55, had shoulder-length blonde hair that was clearly colored to hide the gray. She had a practiced smile and a way of touching my father's arm possessively that made something twist in my stomach. Her daughter Jessica attended with her fiancé Bradley. Jessica was 29, worked in marketing, and had the same calculating eyes as her mother. After the wedding, I kept my mother's jewelry collection in a safe at my house. Each piece was cataloged. The sapphire earrings Dad had given her on their 25th anniversary, the pearl necklace from my grandmother, the ruby ring that had been in our family for 4 generations, and several other precious items, including her platinum and diamond wedding set. 6 months after the wedding, I invited Dad and Diane over for dinner. Dad had been asking about Mom's things, saying he wanted to see them again, so I brought out the collection after we ate. As I opened each velvet box, I shared the stories behind the pieces. Dad smiled sadly at the memories, but Diane's reaction was different. Her eyes sharpened, and she asked detailed questions about the quality of the stones, the settings, where they had been purchased. "These must be worth a small fortune," she commented, holding Mom's diamond tennis bracelet up to the light. "Their value is in their history," I replied, carefully returning the bracelet to its case. 2 weeks later, my house suffered water damage from a burst pipe while I was at a jewelry convention in Chicago. The main floor needed extensive renovation, including my home office where I kept the safe. Concerned about the construction workers coming and going, I reluctantly agreed when Dad suggested keeping the jewelry at their house temporarily. "It'll be safer in our home safe until your renovations are complete," he assured me. "Diane and I barely use it." I transferred the collection to my father's house, providing him with the complete inventory list. 8 weeks max, Dad. Then it comes back to my place. He patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, son. It's all just sitting in the safe." But 4 weeks later, I stopped by unexpectedly to pick up some tools I'd left in Dad's garage. The house was quiet. Dad was at his weekly golf game, and Diane was supposedly at her book club. Looking for a screwdriver, I went to Dad's study and froze when I heard Diane's voice coming from inside. She was clearly on the phone, and she definitely wasn't discussing literature. "Jessica, honey, wait until you see these pieces. The sapphire earrings would be perfect with your dress." I stepped back, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping, but remained within earshot. Of course, Thomas won't mind. They're just sitting in a safe. Harry never even looks at them. Better they go to someone who will wear them and appreciate them. My stomach dropped. I quietly backed away and left without the tools. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying Diane's words in my head. The next day, I made an excuse to stop by when I knew only my father would be home. "Hey, Dad. Just needed to check on something in the jewelry collection for insurance purposes." He seemed hesitant but led me to the study. As he opened the safe, I noticed a small notepad beside it. Dad stepped out to answer a phone call, and I quickly glanced at the pad. There, in flowing handwriting, was a note. "Jessica wedding gift, complete collection surprise for Thomas too." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This was what my mother had feared, her precious mementos leaving our family, being given to strangers who couldn't possibly understand their significance. And based on the note, it appeared my father didn't even know about Diane's plan. 2 days later, I invited my father to lunch at his favorite steakhouse. After some small talk about his golf game and my business, I broached the subject. "Dad, I need to ask you something about Mom's jewelry." He set down his fork. "What about it? Has Diane mentioned giving any of it to Jessica for her wedding?" A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "She mentioned letting Jessica borrow something for the something borrowed tradition." "Why? Are you sure that's all?" "Because I overheard Diane telling Jessica she was giving her the entire collection as a wedding gift." Dad's face reddened. "You must have misunderstood, Harry. Diane would never do that without discussing it with me first. Those are family pieces." "Dad, I saw a note in her handwriting planning to surprise you with this too." He shook his head firmly. "Son, you're reading too much into things. Diane knows how important your mother's memory is to both of us. She's just trying to be inclusive, to make Jessica feel like part of the family. By giving away Mom's jewelry without asking me? Mom specifically wanted those pieces to stay in our family. Harry." His tone had an edge now. "Diane is my wife. Jessica will be family once she's married. You need to let go of this suspicion. It's not healthy." I realized I wasn't getting through to him. Either he was in denial, or Diane had him completely wrapped around her finger. I needed evidence. That weekend, I called my old college roommate Sam Peters, now a security consultant. We hadn't spoken in months, but he didn't hesitate when I explained the situation. "I've got some equipment that might help," he said. "Small cameras, easy to hide, motion activated. If someone's accessing that safe without permission, you'll have proof." The next time I visited Dad's house for Sunday dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom near his study. Instead, I quickly installed one of Sam's cameras on a bookshelf, angled toward the safe. The tiny lens was hidden among Dad's collection of golf trophies. 3 days later, Sam called me. "Harry, you need to see this footage." The video showed Diane entering the study at midnight, opening the safe, she knew the combination, and removing several jewelry boxes. She opened each one, examining the pieces under a desk lamp before carefully repacking most of them. However, she pocketed the sapphire earrings, my mother's beloved 25th anniversary gift. My hands shook with anger as I watched. She took them. "That's not all," Sam said grimly. "Look at the timestamp. This was 5 days ago," which meant Diane had already given the earrings to Jessica. I drove to Jessica's apartment the next day, concocting a story about needing her marketing expertise for my jewelry business. She invited me in, and as we talked in her living room, I spotted them, my mother's sapphire earrings, sitting casually in a jewelry dish on her coffee table. "Those are beautiful earrings," I commented, struggling to keep my voice neutral. Jessica beamed, reaching for them. "Aren't they gorgeous? Mom gave them to me as an early wedding gift. They'll be my something blue." "May I?" I asked, holding out my hand. She passed them over, and I turned them in my palm, recognizing the unique setting my mother had commissioned, the tiny engraving of her and Dad's initials on the back. "They're from a collection that belonged to my mother," I said carefully. Jessica's expression flickered. "Oh well, Mom said your dad wanted me to have them. Since I'm going to be family now." She reached out and took them back quickly. That night, I searched through my mother's personal papers, looking for anything that might help me reclaim her jewelry. In a folder marked legal, I found something that made my heart race. Her will, which I'd never seen before. Dad had handled all the arrangements after her death, telling me everything had been left to him with the understanding he would pass things on appropriately. But there, in black and white, was a specific bequest. To my son, Harry James Mitchell, I leave my entire personal jewelry collection, with the hope that these pieces will remain in our family for generations to come. My mother had legally left her jewelry to me. Dad had either never read the will carefully, or had chosen to ignore this provision. Either way, Diane had no right to give away what was legally mine. I called my father immediately. "Dad, did you know Mom left me her jewelry collection in her will?" A long pause followed. "I didn't think it mattered, son. Everything was going to stay in the family anyway. It matters now that Diane is giving pieces away. The sapphire earrings are already in Jessica's possession." Another pause. "Let me talk to Diane about this." "Dad, Harry, please. Let me handle my wife. I'll get the earrings back and make sure nothing else leaves the house." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt had taken root. My father, once the strongest man I knew, seemed diminished somehow, unwilling to confront the truth about his new wife. I couldn't rely on him to protect my mother's legacy. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I would make replicas of every piece in the collection perfect enough to fool the untrained eye, but with subtle flaws only a professional jeweler would notice. Then I would switch them, securing the originals where Diane couldn't access them. It wasn't just about the monetary value, though that was considerable. It was about keeping a promise to my mother, about preserving the history and memories embedded in each gem and setting. I might not be able to stop Diane from giving Jessica the jewelry, but at least the real pieces would remain in our family. I confided my plan to Sam, who nodded thoughtfully. "It's legally risky, but morally? I'd say you're in the clear. Those pieces are rightfully yours." Over the next 3 weeks I worked after hours in my studio, meticulously crafting replicas of each piece in my mother's collection. I used high-quality cubic zirconia in place of diamonds, lab-created sapphires and rubies instead of natural ones, and silver plated with rhodium instead of platinum. To the untrained eye, they would look authentic, but they were worth a fraction of the originals. The sapphire earrings were already gone, so I started by creating a perfect replica. I would need to find a way to switch them later, but first, I needed to recover and secure the rest of the collection. Sam and I devised a plan to access my father's house when both he and Diane would be away. Dad had mentioned they were attending a charity gala that Saturday evening, a black tie event that would keep them out until at least midnight. Sam and I planned to enter at 8, using the spare key I still had from when I would check on the house during their vacations. Saturday arrived, and I watched from down the street as Dad's car pulled away from the house at 6:30. We waited an additional 30 minutes to be safe, then approached the house. I disabled the alarm system using the code Dad had never changed, and we headed straight for his study. The safe opened with the combination I'd watched Diane use in the camera footage. Inside, I found the familiar velvet boxes, but immediately noticed something concerning 3 were missing. The sapphire earrings, yes, but also my grandmother's pearl necklace and a diamond brooch that had belonged to my great-grandmother. "We need to search the house," I told Sam. "She's taken more pieces than we thought." We carefully went through Diane's closet and dresser, finding the pearl necklace hidden in a false bottom of her jewelry box. The diamond brooch was nowhere to be found. "She must have already given it to Jessica," Sam muttered. While searching, we discovered something else, a drawer full of past due notices and collection letters addressed to Diane. Credit cards maxed out, a second mortgage on a property she'd owned before marrying Dad, even a letter threatening legal action for unpaid taxes. "Looks like your stepmother has some serious financial problems," Sam said, photographing the documents with his phone. "Which explains her interest in my mother's jewelry," I replied grimly. "She's not sentimental, she needs money." We returned to the study and began the swap, carefully replacing each authentic piece with its counterfeit twin. I had just closed the last box when we heard the sound of a key in the front door. "Someone's here," Sam whispered urgently. We quickly closed the safe, spinning the dial, and looked for an escape route. The study had only one door and a window that overlooked the front yard where the newcomer would surely see us leaving. "The closet," Sam hissed. pointing to the walk-in closet where Dad kept his golf clothes and business suits. We had barely closed the closet door when a woman's voice called out, "Hello? Mr. Mitchell?" I recognized the voice of Mrs. Castillo, the housekeeper who came twice a week. Dad must have asked her to check on something while they were out. From our hiding place, we heard her moving around the house, running a vacuum, the clink of dishes being put away. At one point, she entered the study, dusting the bookshelves mere feet from where we held our breath in the closet. After what felt like an eternity, we heard the front door close and lock. We waited 10 more minutes before emerging, then quickly finished our task and left, carefully resetting the alarm. Back at my apartment, I placed the original jewelry in a secure case. The next day, I opened a new safe deposit box at a bank across town, one where neither Dad nor Diane had accounts, and stored the entire collection there. The replicas were now in my father's safe, waiting for Diane to give them away. Each piece looked perfect at first glance, but contained subtle flaws. A slightly misaligned setting, a tiny inclusion in a stone that shouldn't have one, a hallmark that wasn't quite right. If anyone who really knew jewelry examined them carefully, the deception would be revealed. But for Diane and Jessica, who saw only the sparkle and the price tag, they would pass. I had considered confronting Diane with what I knew about her financial troubles, about her plans to give away jewelry that legally belonged to me. But that would alert her to my suspicions, and might prompt her to act more quickly. Better to let her believe she was succeeding, while I protected the true legacy my mother had entrusted to me. Now all I had to do was find a way to swap the sapphire earrings Jessica already had with my replica. An opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected when Jessica called to invite me to her bridal shower. "I know it's usually just for women," she said, "but you're going to be my stepbrother." And I thought, well, since you're a jeweler, maybe you could say a few words about jewelry as heirlooms? Mom mentioned you're quite knowledgeable about family pieces. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'd be honored," I replied, already forming a plan. At the bridal shower, held at an upscale restaurant's private room, I brought an elegant gift box containing a pair of diamond stud earrings I'd made specifically for Jessica. After my brief speech about the significance of jewelry as a connection to our past and future, I presented them to her. "These are beautiful," Jessica exclaimed, immediately trying them on. "I noticed you have a lovely pair of sapphire earrings," I said casually. "Those would complement your wedding dress perfectly." "They're in my purse, actually," Jessica replied. "I was showing them to my maid of honor earlier." When Jessica stepped away to greet new arrivals, I quickly located her purse at her seat, found the sapphire earrings in a side pocket, and made the switch, my heart pounding. The real sapphires were now safely tucked in my pocket, the replicas in their place. One by one, I'd recovered each piece of my mother's collection. Now I could only wait to see what would happen next. Jessica and Bradley's wedding was scheduled for June at a country club overlooking a lake. The invitation described it as an elegant affair, celebrating the union of two souls. But from the discussions I overheard between Diane and my father, it was really about impressing Jessica's colleagues and Bradley's wealthy family. The week before the wedding, Diane asked my father to invite me to dinner. The request surprised me, but I accepted, curious about what she might be planning. The dinner was awkward, with Diane making unusually friendly conversation. After dessert, she excused herself and returned with a familiar burgundy leather case. "Harry," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "I know how much your mother's jewelry means to you, and I wanted to share something special with you." She opened the case to reveal my mother's diamond tennis bracelet, or rather, the replica I had created. "Jessica has fallen in love with this collection, and your father and I think it would be a beautiful gesture if she could wear several pieces for her wedding day. A way of including your mother in the celebration." I forced myself to appear surprised and slightly reluctant, then nodded slowly. "If Dad thinks it's appropriate, then yes, of course." My father looked relieved. "That's very generous, son. It's only for the day, of course." I nodded again, knowing Diane had no intention of returning any of the pieces. She had simply staged this dinner to get my apparent blessing, to prevent any scene at the wedding. The big day arrived, cloudless and perfect. I arrived early, watching the preparations from a distance. Jessica emerged from the bridal suite for photos, resplendent in an elaborate white gown, and, as expected, adorned with my mother's jewelry, the sapphire earrings, the pearl necklace, the diamond pendant, and the tennis bracelet. All replicas, though no one but me knew. During the reception, after the couple's first dance, Diane clinked her glass for attention. My stomach tightened with apprehension. "Bradley and Jessica, today marks the beginning of your beautiful journey together," she began, smiling broadly at the crowd. "Thomas and I wanted to give you something truly special to commemorate this day." She gestured toward Jessica's glittering accessories. "These beautiful pieces that Jessica is wearing today once belonged to Thomas's first wife. And now, they belong to Jessica, to keep and cherish, and perhaps someday pass on to her own children." A murmur rippled through the audience. My father looked stunned, clearly not having been consulted about this gift. I maintained a neutral expression, though inside I felt vindicated in my decision to protect the real jewelry. As guests approached to admire the jewelry more closely, a voice behind me said, "Those aren't Mom's real pieces, are they?" I turned to find my sister Emily standing there, elegant in a navy dress, her eyes sharp with suspicion. Emily lived in Seattle, working as a surgeon, and had flown in just for the wedding, missing the rehearsal dinner due to an emergency surgery. "Let's talk outside," I murmured, guiding her to a quiet spot on the terrace. Once alone, Emily crossed her arms. "Harry, I grew up watching Mom put on those sapphire earrings for special occasions. The ones Jessica is wearing are wrong. The setting is slightly different." "What's going on?" I hesitated only briefly before telling her everything: the will, Diane's plans, the financial documents we'd discovered, and my swap of the jewelry. When I finished, Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head and laughed softly. "My little brother, the master jeweler pulling off a heist. I should be appalled. Are you?" "No. I'm impressed. And relieved." She squeezed my arm. "Mom would be proud that you protected her legacy." I won't say a word. We rejoined the reception, watching as Jessica showed off her new jewelry collection to admiring bridesmaids. Diane caught my eye from across the room and raised her champagne glass in a toast, smirking slightly. She thought she had won. Let her think that, I decided. The truth would reveal itself in time. In the months that followed, Jessica posted numerous photos on social media, featuring her inherited jewelry, always with captions emphasizing their status as precious family heirlooms and irreplaceable treasures. Each post twisted the knife, but I reminded myself that the real treasures were safely stored in my bank vault. Meanwhile, I made an effort to rebuild my relationship with my father. We began meeting for lunch every Thursday, carefully avoiding the topic of the jewelry or Diane. Gradually, he opened up about his life, his golf game, even sharing memories of my mother that he hadn't spoken of since her death. "I miss her every day, Harry," he admitted during one lunch, his eyes distant. "Diane is, well, she's different. Not better or worse, just different." I nodded, suspecting he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The vibrant, confident man my father had once been was fading, replaced by someone who second-guessed himself and seemed perpetually tired. "You know you can talk to me about anything, Dad," I said carefully. "Anything at all." He just patted my hand and changed the subject. 6 months after the wedding, my sister called with interesting news. "Have you seen Jessica's latest post? They're having money troubles. Bradley's startup is failing, and they're looking to downsize their lifestyle." I hadn't been following Jessica's social media since it was too painful seeing her flaunt the jewelry, but I logged on and saw what Emily meant. Jessica had posted, asking for recommendations for high-end consignment shops or reputable jewelry buyers in the area. "She's going to try selling Mom's jewelry," I said. "The fakes, you mean?" Emily corrected. "This should be interesting." A week later, Dad called, sounding agitated. "Harry, do you have time to come over tonight? There's a situation with Jessica, and she's insisting on talking to you." I arrived to find Jessica, Bradley, Diane, and my father in the living room. Jessica's eyes were red from crying, and she jumped up when I entered. "You did this," she accused, pointing a finger at me. "You switched the jewelry." I kept my expression neutral. "What are you talking about?" Bradley stepped forward. "We took the sapphire earrings to Cartwright Jewelers to sell. They examined them and said they're fake cubic zirconia, not sapphires. High-quality fakes, but definitely not genuine. That's ridiculous, Diane interjected. Those earrings have been in the family for years. I turned to my father. Dad, what's this about? He looked miserable. Jessica wanted to sell some pieces due to financial constraints. The jeweler said they're not authentic. You're the only one who could have done this, Jessica insisted, her voice rising. You're a jeweler. You had access. You were always weird about me having these pieces. Jessica, I said calmly, I haven't touched those earrings since before the wedding, when you showed them to me at your bridal shower. If they're not genuine, perhaps they never were. Dad, when did you purchase those earrings for Mom? My father frowned. For our 25th anniversary, from Markham's downtown, they came with certificates of authenticity, which are in the jewelry boxes, I added. Did you bring those to the jeweler, Jessica? She faltered. No, just the earrings. Then maybe you should check the rest of the collection with the proper documentation, I suggested. And maybe with a different jeweler for a second opinion. Diane's face had gone pale. She clearly hadn't expected this development and was calculating her next move. I think that's an excellent idea, she said finally. In fact, let's have the entire collection professionally appraised. Thomas, call Marcus Applebaum. He's the best appraiser in the state. My father nodded, still looking confused by the entire situation. I'll call him tomorrow. I left shortly after, driving home with mixed emotions. The deception was beginning to unravel, but I hadn't anticipated how it would affect my father. He looked wounded, betrayed not just by the possibility of fake jewelry but by the hostility now exposed in his blended family. The appraisal was scheduled for the following week. Marcus Applebaum was indeed well respected in the jewelry community, having worked for 40 years in the business. I had met him at several conventions and knew he was meticulous and honest. The day of the appraisal, I received frantic calls from both Jessica and Diane, which I let go to voicemail. Finally, my father called, and I answered. Harry, he said, his voice strained. The entire collection, every piece, they're all not real. Applebaum says they're the finest replicas he's ever seen, but definitely not genuine gemstones or precious metals. What? I feigned shock. Dad, that's impossible. He's certain. The diamonds are cubic zirconia. The sapphires are lab-created. The metals are silver-plated with rhodium instead of platinum. He paused. Harry, did you know about this? Of course not, I lied, hating the necessity of deceiving my father. I'm as shocked as you are. Diane is talking about contacting the police, filing insurance claims, suing Markham's jewelry. She's very upset. I can imagine, I said carefully. But Dad, those pieces were purchased decades ago, with proper documentation. Before you do anything drastic, let me look into this. Maybe there's an explanation. He sighed heavily. Jessica is devastated. She was counting on selling at least a few pieces to help with their financial situation. The guilt hit me then, not for protecting my mother's jewelry, but for the pain my deception was causing my father. He was caught in the middle, trying to keep peace in a family being torn apart by greed and lies. I'll come over tomorrow, I promised. We'll figure this out. That night, Emily called. The jewelry bomb has detonated, she said without preamble. Jessica called me crying, accusing you of all sorts of things. Diane apparently wants to press charges for theft and fraud. She has no proof, I replied, and she'd have to explain why she was giving away jewelry that legally belongs to me according to Mom's will. True, Emily said. But Harry, this is getting messy. Dad sounds terrible. I'm worried about him. I was too. The stress of this situation couldn't be good for him, especially at his age. I'll talk to him tomorrow, I promised. Try to diffuse things. The next day, I arrived at Dad's house to find Diane had hired a private investigator, a thin man with shrewd eyes who introduced himself as Robert Kellerman. Mr. Mitchell, he said, shaking my hand. I understand you're a jeweler yourself. That's right. Interesting coincidence. The family jewelry collection turns out to be fake, and the one person who would know how to create such perfect replicas is you. I met his gaze steadily. It's also interesting that the person who stood to gain financially from selling these pieces discovered they were fake only when trying to sell them without consulting my father. Kellerman smiled thinly. Touché. I'll be looking into every angle of this case, Mr. Mitchell, including your mother's will, which apparently left the jewelry specifically to you. I blinked in genuine surprise. You found the will? Mrs. Harlow Mitchell provided a copy. Strange that such a specific bequest wasn't honored after your mother's death. Before I could respond, my father entered the room, looking pale and exhausted. That's enough, Mr. Kellerman. You can continue your investigation elsewhere. I need to speak with my son alone. After the investigator left, Dad sank into his armchair. Harry, I don't know what to believe anymore. Diane is talking about lawsuits. Jessica is hysterical. And now there's this will I apparently mishandled. I sat across from him. Dad, He held up a hand. Before you say anything, I need to tell you something. I'm not well, Harry. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I've been having chest pains. The doctor says it's angina, brought on by stress. He's concerned about my heart. He looked up at me, his eyes tired. I can't take much more of this conflict. In that moment, I realized the true cost of my deception. Protecting my mother's legacy wasn't worth endangering my father's health. I had to find a way to resolve this situation quickly, for his sake. Dad, let me handle this. I'll talk to Diane and Jessica. Find a solution that satisfies everyone. He shook his head. I don't think that's possible, son. The damage is done. As I drove home, I wrestled with my options. Coming clean would mean admitting to a deception that might permanently damage my relationship with my father. Continuing the lie meant watching him suffer under increasing stress. Neither choice seemed right. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, my phone rang. It was Emily. Dad's in the hospital, she said, her doctor's composure cracking slightly. He collapsed at home. They think it's his heart. I raced to the hospital, finding Emily in the cardiac unit waiting room. Her face was drawn with worry. How is he? Stable for now. They're running tests, but the initial EKG showed irregularities. She led me to a quiet corner. Harry, this family drama is literally breaking his heart. We have to fix this. I know, I admitted. I'm thinking about telling him everything. Emily considered this. Maybe. But not until he's stronger. She squeezed my arm. Diane's here too. In the cafeteria getting coffee. When Diane returned, she barely acknowledged me. We sat in uncomfortable silence until the doctor emerged 2 hours later. Mr. Mitchell has experienced a cardiac event brought on by extreme stress, the doctor explained. We've stabilized him and started medication, but he needs complete rest and a stress-free environment for recovery. When can we see him? I asked. He's asking for his son, the doctor replied. Just one visitor for now, and keep it brief. I followed the doctor to my father's room, my heart aching at the sight of him connected to monitors, looking suddenly much older than his 65 years. He smiled weakly when he saw me. Harry. Good. I took his hand. Dad, I'm so sorry about all of this. He shook his head slightly. Need to tell you something. Should have told you sooner. Save your strength, Dad. We can talk later. No. Need you to know. His voice was faint, but determined. About Diane. The jewelry. I leaned closer. What about them? I knew, he whispered. Knew she was planning to give the jewelry to Jessica. Found her note months ago. I stared at him in shock. You knew? Why didn't you stop her? His eyes filled with tears. Afraid. Afraid of being alone again. After your mother died, the loneliness. You can't imagine. Diane filled that void. I didn't want to lose her, even if. He trailed off, closing his eyes briefly. Weak. I was weak. No, Dad, I protested. You were grieving. Vulnerable. Let her manipulate me. Let her hurt you. Unforgivable. Dad, please, don't upset yourself. None of that matters right now. He gripped my hand with surprising strength. It does matter. There's more. Diane. She's been taking money. Emptying accounts. Selling stocks from my portfolio. My blood ran cold. How much? Nearly $200,000. Discovered it last week. Confronted her. He coughed weakly. That's when the chest pains started. The pieces fell into place: Diane's financial troubles, her eagerness to get her hands on valuable jewelry, her hasty marriage to my recently widowed father. It had all been calculated. Dad, I need to tell you something too, I said, making a decision. About Mom's jewelry. Slowly, carefully. I explained everything: finding the will, witnessing Diane's deception, creating the replicas, securing the original pieces in a bank vault. When I finished, I expected anger or disappointment. Instead, my father started to laugh, then winced as the motion pulled at the monitors attached to his chest. My son, the master jeweler. Your mother would be proud. He squeezed my hand. You protected her legacy when I couldn't. Thank you. Relief washed over me. You're not angry? How could I be? You did what I should have done, stood up to Diane. His expression grew serious. When I leave this hospital, things will be different. I'm filing for divorce. The doctor returned then, signaling that our time was up. I kissed my father's forehead and promised to return the next day. In the hallway, I found Emily waiting. How did it go? Better than expected. Dad knew about Diane's plans for the jewelry. And worse, she's been systematically draining his accounts. Emily's expression hardened. That's elder financial abuse. It's prosecutable. He wants a divorce. Good, she said firmly. But first, he needs to get well. Over the next few days, Dad's condition improved steadily. Emily and I took turns staying with him, while Diane made brief, performative appearances, clearly uncomfortable under our watchful eyes. During one of her absences, Dad asked me to bring his laptop from home. In the Documents folder, there's a file called Transactions. Download it to a flash drive. Don't let Diane see you. I did as he asked, retrieving the laptop and finding the file. It contained meticulous records of every unauthorized transfer Diane had made over the past year and a half, along with emails between her and her financial advisor, discussing how to access and liquidate Dad's assets without raising red flags. Dad's been collecting evidence, I told Emily, showing her the file. He's more strategic than we gave him credit for. Must run in the family, she replied dryly. A week later, Dad was discharged from the hospital. To everyone's surprise, he asked to stay with me rather than return home with Diane. I need peace and quiet to recover, he told her firmly when she protested. Harry's place is ideal. Once settled in my guest room, Dad called his lawyer. Within 24 hours, divorce papers were drawn up, accounts were frozen, and a forensic accountant was engaged to trace every missing dollar. The confrontation came 3 days later, when Diane arrived unannounced at my house, demanding to see her husband. He's not available, I said, blocking the doorway. Get out of my way. I know he's here. Mrs. Harlow Mitchell. My father's voice came from behind me. He stood in the hallway, leaning on a cane but straight-backed and resolute. You should have called first. My lawyer advised against any unscheduled visits. Diane's face paled. Thomas, what are you doing? You need to come home. You need me to take care of you. Like you've been taking care of my finances? Dad replied coldly. You've been served divorce papers. I suggest you review them with your attorney. This is ridiculous. You're not thinking clearly. It's your medication. It's actually the clearest I've thought in 2 years, Dad interrupted. Harry, would you please show Mrs. Harlow Mitchell out? And Diane, he added, his voice hardening, I expect the remaining jewelry to be returned to my son immediately. All of it belongs to him, as stipulated in his mother's will. Diane's composure cracked. Those worthless fakes? Keep them. Jessica already threw them across the room when she found out they were worthless. Then we have nothing further to discuss, Dad said, turning to go back to his room. Wait, I said, unable to resist. Don't you want to know what happened to the real jewelry? Diane froze. What? The genuine pieces. Mom's actual jewelry collection. Don't you want to know where it is? Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I smiled slightly. I guess you'll never know. After Diane left, Dad settled in his armchair with a sigh. I should have seen through her from the beginning. She was manipulative, Dad. And you were vulnerable. He nodded slowly. Your mother would be so disappointed in me. No, I said firmly. Mom would understand. And she'd be proud of how you're handling things now. He smiled slightly. Maybe. Then he looked at me curiously. Harry, where are the real jewelry pieces? In a bank vault across town. Would you like to see them? Not yet. He leaned back, closing his eyes. But I'm glad to know they're safe. Your mother would be pleased. That night, Emily joined us for dinner, bringing a bottle of Dad's favorite scotch. The three of us sat talking late into the evening, sharing memories of Mom, laughing at old family stories. It was the first time since her death that we'd been able to talk about her without an edge of pain cutting through the memories. To Mom, Emily said, raising her glass, who always knew the real value of things wasn't in their price tag. To Mom, Dad and I echoed. Later, as I was clearing dishes, Dad called me back to the living room. Harry, there's one more thing I need to tell you. Something your mother asked me to give you when the time was right. From his wallet, he extracted a folded piece of paper. She wrote letters for major life events, birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, and this one was about her jewelry. With trembling hands, I unfolded the note, recognizing my mother's elegant handwriting immediately. My darling Harry, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've had to make difficult choices about protecting our family's treasures. Remember that the real legacy isn't in the gems or medals, but in the love they represent. You have always been my most precious jewel. All my love, Mom. The tears came then, for all of us. Not just for what we had lost, but for what we had protected and preserved, both the physical reminders of my mother and the bonds between those she had left behind. In the months that followed, our family began to heal. Dad's health improved steadily, as the stress of his toxic marriage fell away. The divorce proceedings moved forward, with Dad's lawyer building an airtight case of financial abuse and fraud against Diane. The forensic accountant traced nearly $300,000 that Diane had methodically siphoned from Dad's accounts over 18 months. Evidence mounted that she had targeted him specifically after researching wealthy widowers in the area. Jessica attempted to distance herself from her mother's actions, claiming ignorance of the financial schemes. However, text messages recovered during the investigation revealed she had been fully aware of and complicit in the plan to acquire and sell my mother's jewelry. I can't believe how naive I was, Dad said one evening as we reviewed the latest findings. All the signs were there. We both missed them, I assured him. We were grieving, not thinking clearly. Dad had moved permanently into my guest house, a charming one-bedroom cottage behind my main home that I'd previously used as a studio. We had fallen into a comfortable routine, having breakfast together before I left for my jewelry shop, then dinner in the evening where we discussed our days. 3 months after Dad's hospitalization, the divorce was finalized. The judge, appalled by the evidence of calculated financial exploitation, awarded Dad full restitution plus punitive damages. Diane managed to avoid criminal charges by agreeing to the settlement, but her reputation in our community was destroyed. On a sunny Saturday in April, exactly 1 year after Jessica's wedding, I invited Emily over for a special dinner. When she arrived, Dad and I led her to my home office, where a familiar burgundy leather case sat on my desk. It's time, I said, opening the case to reveal our mother's jewelry collection, the genuine pieces, gleaming under the office lights. Emily gasped, reaching out to touch the pearl necklace. They're beautiful, just as I remember. These belong to our family, I said. To all of us. Mom wanted them to stay with us, to be worn and enjoyed, not locked away. I lifted out a small velvet box and handed it to Emily. This is for you. Inside was a pendant I had crafted using a small diamond from Mom's collection, set in a new design that incorporated elements of our family crest. Harry, it's exquisite, she whispered, tears in her eyes. There's enough here for us to each have pieces that are meaningful, while keeping the core collection intact for future generations, I explained. I've been working on designs that honor Mom's original pieces while creating something new. Dad picked up the sapphire earrings. Your mother wore these at Emily's medical school graduation, he remembered, smiling. She was so proud. It was the first time I'd seen him handle Mom's jewelry without pain shadowing his features. The healing had begun. That evening, as we shared a meal on my patio, Dad cleared his throat. "I have some news. I've been attending a grief support group at the community center. It's been helpful." Emily and I exchanged glances. This was the first we'd heard of it. "That's wonderful, Dad," I said. "I've met someone there." He looked slightly embarrassed. "Not romantically, just a friend. Her name is Grace. Her husband died of cancer last year. Would you like to invite her to dinner sometime?" I asked. Dad smiled. "Maybe. Eventually. We're just walking in the park once a week, talking. It's nice to have someone who understands." 2 weeks later, I opened a small jewelry gallery adjacent to my custom design studio. The featured collection, which I called Legacy, consisted of pieces inspired by my mother's jewelry. I used no materials from her original collection. Those remained intact for our family, but created new works that captured their essence and stories. The gallery opening was a success, with local press covering the event. In my brief speech to the gathered crowd, I spoke about how jewelry connects us to our past while creating bridges to our future. "Each piece tells a story," I said, "of love, of memory, of promises kept." Dad stood proudly at my side, healthier and more vibrant than I'd seen him in years. Emily had flown in for the event, wearing the pendant I'd created for her. And in a small velvet box in my pocket was another special piece, a replica of Mom's wedding band that I'd made for Dad, engraved with a message, "Love endures." Later that evening, after the guests had left, Dad and I sat in the quiet gallery. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Harry," he said, looking around at the displays. "Not just for this," he gestured at the jewelry, "but for how you protected her wishes, for how you've forgiven me." There was nothing to forgive, Dad. We were both doing our best in a difficult time. He nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I found this yesterday, going through some old files. I thought you should have it." It was a photograph of my mother, taken when she was about my age. She was laughing, her head thrown back, sunlight catching the sapphire earrings that matched her eyes. She looked so vibrant, so alive. I'd forgotten how beautiful her smile was, I said softly. "She had the same smile when she talked about you," Dad replied. "So proud of the man you were becoming." We sat in comfortable silence, the photo between us bridging past and present. 6 months later, I received an email from Jessica. She and Bradley had divorced, and she was moving to Chicago for a fresh start. Her message was brief but seemed genuine. "Harry, I'm sorry for everything that happened. I was blinded by greed and my mother's influence. I hope someday you can forgive me. Jessica." I showed the message to Dad over dinner. "Will you respond?" he asked. "I'm not sure. Maybe someday." He nodded in understanding. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. The wisdom in his words struck me. We had all been on a journey these past few years through grief, betrayal, and healing. Today, the real jewelry collection remains in our family. Some pieces worn regularly, others preserved for special occasions. I eventually gave Emily our grandmother's pearl necklace, which she wore at her wedding to a kind cardiothoracic surgeon she met at her hospital. Dad has a few select pieces that remind him of special moments with Mom. The rest remain in a special display case in my home, each piece cataloged with its story and history. Someday, these treasures will pass to the next generation, carrying with them not just their material value, but the lessons we learned in protecting them about standing up for what's right, about the true meaning of family, about keeping promises. As for Dad, he eventually did invite Grace to dinner. She's a thoughtful, gentle woman who brings out the best in him without trying to replace Mom's memory. They enjoy concerts, walks, and quiet evenings discussing books. It's not a grand romance, but a comfortable companionship built on mutual respect and shared experiences. My jewelry business has flourished, with the Legacy collection becoming my signature line. Each piece I create now carries a hidden mark, a tiny engraved E for Elizabeth, my mother's name a private tribute to the woman whose values shaped my life. In protecting my mother's legacy, I discovered something unexpected, that the most valuable inheritance she left wasn't the jewelry at all, but the courage to stand up for what matters, the wisdom to recognize true worth, and the capacity to forgive and move forward. What about you? Have you ever had to protect something precious from someone who didn't understand its true value? Or have you learned, as I did, that sometimes the real treasures in life aren't things at all, but the memories and connections they represent? Comment below and share your story. And if you found value in mine, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of what truly matters in life. Thank you for listening. And remember, the most precious legacies are the ones we carry in our hearts.